Welcome the anointed ones. In war, timing is everything, but in destiny, precision is divine. That's exactly what just happened with your last move. You didn't merely make a decision, you orchestrated a full-scale operation that has military analysts scratching their heads and spiritual forces taking notes. Somewhere, a retired general is rewatching your timeline like it's classified footage, muttering, "Who trained this one?" Because the way you executed that last step, it wasn't luck. It was a blueprint written in divine encryption. Let's be honest. Most people move emotionally. They react, they rant, they rush. But you waited, you observed. You let every chaotic noise burn itself out before you struck with precision so clean it looked accidental. That's the kind of move they call a black ops moment. Silent, surgical, and unforgettable. While others were broadcasting their plans, you were building an algorithm of outcomes, reading human behavior like encrypted code. And here's the wild part. Studies from modern intelligence circles confirm that 80% of successful missions aren't about strength or weapons. They're about strategy and unpredictability. You somehow embodied both. Your decision wasn't just smart, it was strategic to the point of spiritual. You played a move that would make Pentagon strategists nod in reluctant respect and make Putin whisper. That's how you do it. There's something unnerving and slightly hilarious about how your enemies didn't even realize they were participants in your plan. They thought they were outsmarting you, not realizing you'd already gamed out every variable 5 steps ahead. You didn't just flip the board, you redesigned the entire battlefield. So now the world's watching, some in awe, some in confusion, and others in regret, trying to figure out how you pulled it off. But they'll never fully understand because your last move wasn't born from impulse or intellect alone. It came from alignment, the moment your spirit and strategy became one frequency. This isn't coincidence. This is a military masterclass, spiritual edition, the kind that studied from the Pentagon to Putin, but originated from the kind of divine intelligence that no classroom can teach. And tonight, we're about to dissect exactly how you did it. Number 1, you didn't react. You executed a pre-calculated silence. That single decision rewrote the whole game. While everyone else was rushing to respond, to defend, to clap back, you did something terrifying to the untrained mind. You paused. You held your ground in complete stillness, not out of weakness, but because you understood that movement without meaning is just noise. You weren't frozen. You were focused. You were reading every shift, every motive, every psychological vibration in the air before making a single move. That's not just maturity, that's mastery. People around you mistook your silence for surrender because they couldn't recognize strategy when it wasn't loud. They didn't realize that silence has layers. And you were playing chess while they were still arguing over the rules. Every second you stayed quiet, they revealed more of themselves. Their insecurities got louder, their alliances exposed themselves, and their false confidence began to crack. You made them talk too much, and in their overexposure, they gave you everything you needed to win without firing a single shot. You turned silence into surveillance. That's what made your move a masterclass. While they were performing for attention, you were observing for intel. You studied their tone, their timing, their tells, every habit, every inconsistency. You gathered intelligence the way elite tacticians do, quietly, patiently, deliberately. The more they tried to provoke you, the more data you collected. You understood that reacting would waste energy, but restraining would multiply it. So, you waited until your words could cut with precision instead of emotion. Your stillness became the trap they walked into willingly. They mistook your lack of response for lack of awareness. They thought you were disconnected, but you were dissecting. They thought they were advancing, but you were allowing them to expose their blueprint. Then, when they least expected it, your silence ended with a single, perfectly timed action that undid months of their plotting. That's the difference between reacting and executing. Reacting comes from emotion, executing comes from understanding. And your silence was the loudest understanding they'd ever witnessed. You didn't just withhold words, you withheld access. You took control of the tempo, turned patience into power, and proved that restraint isn't weakness. It's high-level warfare disguised as calm. Number 2, you turned chaos into camouflage. While everyone else was trying to look composed, predictable, and in control, you allowed life's confusion to become your disguise. You didn't fight the storm, you blended with it. That's what made your strategy so genius. You understood something most people never learn. When everything looks chaotic, no one can trace your real intentions. You became unreadable, and that's the hardest position to attack. When people expected you to panic, you stayed unbothered. When they expected you to collapse, you adjusted. You didn't waste energy trying to explain your process to people who couldn't even grasp your perspective. You let things appear messy because you knew that within that mess was hidden order. Every unexpected turn, every unpredictable moment became a layer of protection around your purpose. While they were trying to calculate your next move, they couldn't even figure out which direction you were facing. That's what chaos does for a wise person. It conceals their growth until it's too late to stop it. Your life started moving in ways that made no sense to onlookers, and that was the beauty of it. Confusion became your cover. People wrote you off, thinking you'd lost control, but you had never been more strategic. You were letting uncertainty mislead your observers while you built something too intricate for them to comprehend. The more unpredictable your journey looked, the more secure your mission became. No one attacks what they can't define. You made yourself unclassifiable, too calm for the critics, too complex for the copycats. What's truly remarkable is that you didn't resist the disorder. You redirected it. You learned how to turn what was meant to distract you into a defensive shield. That's a level of awareness that goes beyond intellect. That's intuition fused with discipline. You stopped chasing the illusion of control and started using unpredictability as your advantage. While others were trying to manage every variable, you learned to move with fluidity, adapting faster than they could react. By turning chaos into camouflage, you mastered invisibility in plain sight. You stopped needing to prove stability because your purpose didn't require performance. It required precision. That's how you outmaneuvered them. You didn't hide by running. You hid by being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Number 3, you stopped playing the game and started studying the players. That's when everything shifted in your favor. Most people get trapped in the surface. They focus on winning rounds, arguments, or attention. But you went deeper. You stopped obsessing over outcomes and started observing human behavior. You realized that every person moves according to their programming, and if you can decode that programming, you can predict their next move before they even think of it. That's not manipulation. That's mastery. You stopped getting emotional about people's actions and started analyzing their patterns. You noticed that ego always reveals itself in repetition. The way someone celebrates, the way they lie, the way they compete. It's all data. You learned that people rarely change. They just hide their motives better. So, while others were distracted by performance, you were collecting information. You became a silent observer, not to judge, but to understand. That shift gave you a power that most people never develop. The power to stay 5 steps ahead without saying a word. Every betrayal became a study. Every argument became research. Every relationship, whether good or bad, became a masterclass in psychology. You stopped being shocked by people's behavior because you began to see the patterns behind it. You started recognizing when words didn't match energy, when kindness was laced with control, and when confidence was just fear-wearing perfume. That's how you stopped getting blindsided, because you started reading people for who they were, not for who they pretended to be. The real turning point came when you stopped taking things personally. Once you detached emotionally, you saw people's actions as predictable scripts rather than random attacks. You realized that human behavior runs on habit, and habit always leaves a trail. That awareness turned your life into a strategy board where you were no longer reacting but orchestrating. You didn't need to expose anyone. You just stopped giving them roles in your story. That's why your last move looked so flawless. It wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated from months, maybe years of observation. You weren't just in the game. You had mastered the psychology of everyone playing it. And by understanding the players, you stopped needing to prove anything. You simply moved in precision, letting your awareness lead where emotion once did. Number 4, you weaponized restraint, and that was your breakthrough. In a time where everyone rushes to defend, to prove, to respond, you did something that rattled your opponents more than any counterattack ever could. You didn't move. You didn't explain. You didn't justify. You let the noise burn itself out while you conserved every ounce of energy for the one move that would actually count. That level of discipline is rare because it demands ego death. You had to let people believe what they wanted to, even when you could have easily corrected them. But restraint gave you something they didn't have: control over the battlefield. You understood that reaction is free information for your enemies. Every time you show frustration, they learn your triggers. Every time you rush to defend yourself, they map your insecurities. So, you stopped giving them data. You starved them of access. And that silence became unnerving. When you didn't respond to their provocations, they started guessing. When you didn't take their bait, they started doubting. That's the beauty of restraint. It turns the aggressor inward. They start fighting their own paranoia while you quietly regain your advantage. Every person who underestimated your quietness didn't realize you were gathering intelligence. You watched them exhaust themselves, expose their loyalties, and reveal their desperation. You turned their impatience into confession. The more they tried to provoke you, the more they uncovered themselves. And while they mistook your stillness for weakness, you were timing your move with surgical precision. When you finally acted, it wasn't out of emotion. It was out of strategy. One action, one statement, one shift. And everything they built collapsed under its own instability. That's what restraint really is. Not suppression, but strategy. It's the art of conserving energy until it becomes unstoppable force. You didn't lose momentum by pausing. You gained clarity. You learned that you don't need to move every time something shakes you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay still long enough to see who reveals themselves when you do nothing. You mastered the kind of patience that terrifies manipulators, the kind that studies instead of reacts. You turned waiting into warfare and silence into a sword. That's not weakness. That's genius in slow motion. Number 5, you let them think they won the skirmish, and that was the most brilliant psychological trap of all. You understood that the fastest way to expose arrogance is to feed it. So you did the unthinkable. You stepped back. You let them throw their punches, take their little victories, and parade around as if they'd conquered something. You didn't interrupt the performance. You knew the power of illusion, and you let them believe it. Because when ego takes the stage, it always performs past its own limit. You didn't lose the battle. You set it up so the war would win itself. Ego is the enemy's blindfold. Once someone believes they've outsmarted you, they stop evolving. They get sloppy. They stop watching their back because they think the story is over. That's where you had them. Your loss wasn't a failure. It was an invisibility cloak. By stepping aside, you moved from being a target to being a ghost in the system. They relaxed their defenses, they bragged too loudly, and in that noise, they exposed every weakness you needed to see. Every time they laughed at your so-called defeat, you were listening. Every time they bragged about your downfall, you were noting who clapped the loudest. You studied every alliance, every fake smile, every subtle shift in energy. What they didn't realize was that you were still on the field. You just changed terrain. You weren't hiding out of fear. You were gathering information, refining your strategy, sharpening your patience. You didn't bow out. You were building up. The moment they thought they had buried you, you were already rewriting the entire map. When you finally moved again, it was with precision they couldn't anticipate. You didn't need revenge, you had revelation. You let them exhaust themselves, chasing shadows, while you prepared the storm that would end their illusion permanently. That's why when you finally acted, it wasn't loud or messy, it was decisive. You let them believe they'd won because you understood the higher truth. Only those blinded by ego confuse victory with closure. You gave them the illusion of triumph so you could own the reality of power. And when the dust settled, they realized too late. They hadn't won anything. They just walked straight into the lesson you built for them. Number 6, you used exposure as a booby trap. And that was the move that flipped the whole power dynamic. Most people guard every detail, thinking secrecy equals safety. But you understood something far more sophisticated. Information control isn't just about hiding, it's about selective visibility. You learned to weaponize transparency. You showed them what you wanted them to see, not what was actually happening. You gave them a version of you that was slightly cracked, slightly uncertain, slightly unguarded, just enough to trigger their instinct to pounce. And when they did, you had them exactly where you wanted them. You knew that pride always walks straight into the light, thinking it's victory. So you became the light. You presented the illusion of vulnerability, knowing it would attract those with hidden motives like moths to a flame. You let them think they had inside access to your weaknesses, but you were really mapping their intentions. Every question they asked, every reaction they gave, revealed what they wanted most: control. What they didn't know was that their curiosity was being tracked, catalogued, and studied. You weren't just being observed, you were observing the observers. That's the brilliance of your method. You flipped the psychology of exposure. While they were convinced you'd slipped, you were actually testing loyalty. You were measuring who would use what you revealed to help you and who would use it to harm you. The moment they moved wrong, you didn't need confrontation. Their actions exposed them louder than words ever could. You didn't need to trap them physically. They trapped themselves by acting on false information. Every piece of truth you let them see was a setup for discernment. You created a stage where intentions couldn't hide. You made people show their cards by giving them a fake deck. That's high-level intelligence. To let someone believe they've gained the upper hand, only to realize they were never in the game at all. You turned exposure into execution. What looked like recklessness was actually precision. You weren't leaking weakness, you were filtering energy. You understood that control isn't about being unseen, it's about being unpredictably transparent. By mastering what you revealed and when, you made curiosity your weapon and deceit their undoing. Number 7, you mastered the art of energy redistribution, and that changed everything. You stopped letting emotions drain you and started using them as fuel. Where most people explode under pressure, you absorbed the impact, processed it, and turned it into propulsion. Every disappointment, every insult, every moment that tried to break you, you recycled it. You learned how to convert emotional heat into forward motion. That's not just strength, that's evolution. You stopped leaking energy and started investing it. Anger stopped being something that consumed you and became something that informed you. Instead of reacting out of rage, You began responding with reason. You turned emotional turbulence into tactical awareness, studying what triggered you and why. That's how you grew sharper. You realized that anger is just energy looking for direction, and if you give it a purpose, it becomes unstoppable. Pain stopped being a punishment and became a tool. It made you observe patterns, refine your judgment, and trust your instincts. You no longer wasted time fighting battles that didn't build you. Every strike against you became an upgrade to your discernment. Rejection stopped hurting the way it used to, because you saw it for what it really was. Redirection. Every time a door closed, it taught you how to build your own. Every time someone counted you out, it clarified who was never meant to count in. You used rejection like reconnaissance, gathering intel about what environments didn't deserve your energy. Instead of letting bitterness grow roots, you used it as compost for your next level. What's extraordinary is how natural your transformation became. You no longer needed external validation to feel powerful because you discovered internal circulation, the ability to generate strength from within. Where others wasted emotional ammunition on proving themselves, you used yours to refine your purpose. Every wound, instead of leaving you weaker, left you wiser. You turned emotional breakdowns into spiritual data points. That's what no military or system can replicate, the ability to take invisible pain and translate it into visible progress. You became your own power plant. Every emotion that once destabilized you now fuels you. That's mastery in motion, not avoiding emotion, but redirecting it until every loss becomes an asset and every scar becomes strategy. Number 8, you made predictability impossible. And that was your greatest power move. You stopped moving in straight lines, the kind that people can study, anticipate, or mirror. One day you were calm and calculating, and the next you were unstoppable and untraceable. You became fluid, never staying in one version of yourself long enough for anyone to define you. That's what threw everyone off balance. They couldn't prepare for you because you kept rewriting your own algorithm. Every time they thought they had you figured out, you shifted frequencies. You became a moving paradox, structured yet spontaneous, peaceful yet powerful, quiet yet commanding. You stopped living in patterns because you understood that patterns are prisons for the predictable. Most people are easy to control because they're consistent in their habits, their reactions, their weaknesses. But you evolved beyond that. You learned to move according to alignment, not routine. Your steps became guided by insight, not impulse. You weren't rebelling, you were adapting, moving faster than their analysis could track. When they thought you were retreating, you were regenerating. When they thought you were done, you were transforming. That kind of unpredictability isn't chaos, it's higher intelligence at work. You blurred the line between strategy and spirituality. You didn't just make smart moves, you made divine ones. You started listening to energy more than opinions. You stopped explaining your process and started trusting your intuition to lead the way. That's why no one could decode you, because you weren't operating on logic alone anymore. You were moving on vibration. You mastered the balance between instinct and intellect. And that's a combination no system knows how to measure. Your unpredictability made control impossible. People who once studied you like a formula got lost when the equation stopped working. They kept trying to find the old version of you, not realizing that version had already evolved into another frequency. You became a living shift, not just changing your mind, but changing your entire mode of existence whenever the moment demanded it. That's why your last move can't be traced. You transcended the need to be understood. You stopped being a player in the system and became the variable that breaks it. You didn't just move differently, you moved beyond definition. Number 9, you turned disadvantage into data, and that was the turning point where loss stopped meaning defeat. Every time you were outnumbered, dismissed, or pushed into a corner, you didn't crumble, You studied. You treated every setback like a surveillance mission. When they talked over you, you listened harder. When they tried to block your path, you watched their coordination. You learned the rhythm of their arrogance, the tone of their lies, and the hidden cracks in their alliances. While they thought they were overpowering you, they were actually exposing themselves, and you were recording everything. You understood something that few people grasp. Losing isn't failure if you're learning while it happens. You began to see how much information hides in disadvantage. When resources were scarce, you learned innovation. When you had no allies, you learned independence. When people underestimated you, you learned invisibility. Every disadvantage refined your adaptability. You started gathering data on how people operate when they think you can't fight back. And that's where their truth showed. That's when masks slip, hierarchies crumble, and power becomes sloppy. You didn't interrupt it, you observed it. Those moments taught you how to think like both the hunter and the hunted. You saw patterns others missed because you experienced them from the bottom up. You watched who broke under pressure, who betrayed under fear, and who pretended to help while secretly competing. That gave you something priceless, insight. You didn't need to dominate the moment because you were mastering the map. By the time others celebrated their small victories, you already knew how to dismantle their entire strategy. You turned every mistake, rejection, and obstacle into a field report. You learned to analyze your own emotions as well. How frustration signals redirection, how exhaustion reveals where energy is leaking, how silence gathers clarity. You weren't being punished, you were being trained in data-driven discernment. By treating every disadvantage as information instead of humiliation, you positioned yourself beyond emotion and into evolution. You became a walking archive of lessons your enemies never meant to teach you. And that's why your comeback felt like prophecy, not coincidence, because your victories weren't improvised. They were built on everything you once endured and decoded. Number 10. You disguised divine timing as human hesitation. And that's why your steps looked confusing to those watching from the outside. They mistook your pauses for procrastination, not realizing you were following instructions from a higher command center. While they mocked your stillness and labeled it indecision, you were aligning your movement with timing so perfect it could only have been divinely engineered. You understood that rushing is a form of fear, and you refused to let fear dictate your direction. You didn't delay out of doubt. You delayed because you sensed heaven was synchronizing something larger than your own perspective could see. Every time it looked like you'd missed an opportunity, it was actually being recalibrated to fit you better. When doors shut, they weren't rejection, they were rerouting. You weren't being left behind. You were being held back until the environment matched your vibration. That's what divine timing really is. Spiritual geometry, where every angle, every intersection, every delay fits into a design so intricate, it makes chaos look planned. You were moving in rhythm with a force that doesn't rush, because what's eternal never hurries. Your enemies read your patience as hesitation, but they didn't know that hesitation can be holy. You weren't frozen, you were filtering. You were checking the spiritual weather, sensing when the atmosphere was favorable for breakthrough and when it wasn't. While they were forcing outcomes, you were waiting for clearance. And when your moment finally came, it wasn't random, it was synchronized. Everything that once felt delayed suddenly made perfect sense. That's what separates divine strategy from human ambition. Ambition moves by impulse, strategy moves by instruction. You weren't guessing your way forward, you were guided. You trusted that what seems like too late in human time is often right on cue in divine order. You mastered the discipline of stillness in a world that worships speed. So when you finally made your move, it hit with precision, not panic. It looked effortless because it was executed at the exact second destiny opened the gate. You didn't need to chase timing. You became aligned with it. You moved when heaven said move, and that's why your so-called delay became the doorway to everything they thought you missed. Number 11. You turned every betrayal into a blueprint, and that's what made you unstoppable. Most people crumble when trust collapses, but you turned treachery into training. Every betrayal that was meant to break you ended up becoming your manual for mastery. You began to see patterns in deception: who betrays, when they betray, and why. You realized betrayal wasn't random, it was strategic exposure. It revealed how loyalty operates under pressure and how masks melt under truth. You stopped taking betrayal personally and started studying it like an architect studies structure, not for emotion, but for design. Each backstab became a compass, pointing you toward what needed reinforcement. Every person who turned on you taught you something about the architecture of manipulation. You learned where the cracks in your trust system were, where your empathy needed boundaries, and where your heart needed armor. They thought they were teaching you pain, but they were teaching you precision. You started recognizing how liars move, how pretenders speak, and how hidden enemies disguise themselves as supporters. You stopped being naive, not because you grew colder, but because you became wiser. By the time they noticed, you were no longer the same target they first attacked. You had mapped their psychology. You could sense betrayal before it happened, and rather than panic, you took notes. You studied the rhythm of deception so well that you could read silence, energy shifts, and even subtle changes in tone as warning signals. What they thought was chaos was really your classroom. You didn't just go through betrayal, you extracted intelligence from it. So when new battles arose, you weren't walking in blind faith anymore. You were walking with decoded insight. You didn't need to guess people's loyalty. You could see it in their consistency. Every knife they used against you became a pen in your hand, writing the manual they didn't know they were helping you build. You mastered your emotions, sharpened your discernment, and became impossible to ambush. You turned betrayal into blueprint, and that's why what once wounded you now works for you. You didn't just survive deception, you engineered wisdom from it. They trained you through treachery, and now you command the very battlefield they thought would destroy you. Number 12, you waged a war of frequency, not flesh, and that changed everything. You stopped meeting people at the level of their chaos and started operating at the altitude of your clarity. You learned that some battles aren't meant to be fought head-on. They're meant to be out-vibrated. Instead of swinging back, you started soaring higher. You discovered that peace wasn't weakness. It was a weapon that disarmed confusion. While your enemies schemed in the realm of noise, you shifted into the realm of resonance, where only truth can breathe. You understood that energy doesn't lie. Every intention, every thought, every word carries a vibration, and once you elevated yours, you became untouchable. They couldn't track you anymore because they were tuned to a lower frequency. The insults bounced off. The manipulation lost access. The warfare that used to drain you couldn't even locate you. You stopped reacting, and in that stillness, your power multiplied. What they mistook for indifference was actually spiritual superiority, not in ego, but in evolution. While they used gossip as their ammunition, you used silence as your strategy. While they fought to be seen, you fought to stay aligned. You realized that true power doesn't scream, it radiates. And every time you chose calm over chaos, your vibration shifted the entire battlefield. Suddenly, their plans began collapsing without you lifting a finger. Because frequency governs form. And when your energy rose above theirs, reality followed your command. You began to understand that warfare isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who sustains the highest vibration the longest. You stopped defending yourself in flesh because you understood. Flesh can be framed, but frequency cannot. They could lie about your character, but they couldn't fake your energy. You started winning battles without confrontation, without revenge, without retaliation. You simply stayed in alignment, and that alignment did the heavy lifting. That's the kind of warfare generals can't study, because it's not in any manual. You didn't conquer through control. You conquered through calibration. You changed your energy, and the war changed its rules. And that's when you realized you didn't escape the battle. You transcended it. Because altitude will always beat attitude every single time. Number 13. You turned their surveillance into your stage, and that was your quietest rebellion. They thought monitoring you would make them masters of your movement, but it only made them spectators of their own confusion. You realized early on that when people watch with the intent to control, they stop seeing truth. They only see what threatens them. So you gave them something to look at. You turned scrutiny into spectacle. Every step, every silence, every shift became an unpredictable performance that kept their data incomplete and their analysis off balance. You understood that being watched wasn't always a curse. Sometimes it was camouflage. They thought they were collecting intel. You were collecting insight. You studied how they studied you. Their reactions revealed their insecurities. Their silence revealed their intentions. And while they tried to dissect your life like a mission report, you turned every observation into misdirection. You let them think they were seeing everything, when in reality, they were only watching what you allowed. You became the illusionist in your own story, letting them chase shadows while you built substance. They thought they had you cornered because they could predict your next move, but that's where you outclassed them. You stopped moving in patterns. You started moving in purpose. Their cameras, eyes, and gossip channels couldn't keep up because you evolved in dimensions they didn't even believe existed. What they documented was outdated by the time they recorded it. And that's the beauty of it. They thought surveillance would limit you, but it only magnified your mystery. You learned how to perform under pressure without losing authenticity. You learned how to shine without revealing your strategy. You let them waste hours decoding your every step, while you used that same attention as fuel for your ascension. They were busy taking notes. You were busy taking ground. By the time they realized you had turned their observation into your advantage, it was too late. Their surveillance became your spotlight. Their obsession became your advertisement. And their confusion became your cover. You turned their control tactic into a classroom on unpredictability. They're still trying to analyze your moves, not knowing the real performance was never your actions. It was your evolution. Number 14. You didn't win with power. You won with precision. And that's what separates warriors from legends. You weren't trying to overpower anyone. You were studying the rhythm beneath the chaos. You knew that while most people fight to be seen, the real victors fight to understand. You learned the architecture of conflict, the pressure points, the timing, the triggers, and you struck not with rage, but with refined awareness. Your final move wasn't explosive. It was exact. It didn't need to be loud, because true precision doesn't announce itself. It executes with elegance. You discovered that brute force is for those who lack insight. Anyone can throw punches, but few can place them where they matter. You realized that noise wins moments, but accuracy wins wars. While they bragged about strength, you quietly refined your aim. You stopped reacting emotionally and started responding intelligently. You studied not just people's actions, but their patterns, the repetition of ego, the predictability of pride, the laziness of those who think they're untouchable. You didn't have to overpower them, you simply had to outthink them. Every delay, every betrayal, every attempt to corner you became part of your calibration process. You learned how to move with minimal effort but maximum effect. When you finally made your move, it looked effortless. but only because your precision was perfected in silence. You hit the exact weak spot in the structure, the one they didn't even know existed, and when the system collapsed, everyone thought it was sudden. But it wasn't. It was surgical timing, strategic restraint, divine geometry in motion. Your victory didn't come from domination. It came from discipline. You didn't crush your enemies. You made them collapse under the weight of their own miscalculations. You didn't need to scream your power. You demonstrated it through accuracy. You won not by overpowering the opposition, but by mastering yourself. That's what makes your triumph unsettling. It wasn't fueled by ego, but by evolution. You didn't just win the battle. You rewrote how the war is fought. Your win is now a blueprint, a quiet warning to every system that mistook your calm for weakness. Because in a world obsessed with power plays, you proved that precision, spiritual, mental, and emotional, is the highest form of dominance. At this point, it's clear. Your last move wasn't luck. It was legacy. You didn't stumble into brilliance. You engineered it with divine intelligence, spiritual discipline, and relentless awareness. Every step you took was a calculated echo of something higher guiding your path. You weren't just moving pieces on a board. You were rewriting the laws of strategy itself. Every pause, every setback, every silence had a reason. Every delay was divine design. What looked like waiting was weaponizing. What looked like defeat was data collection. What looked like isolation was initiation. You became the kind of force no army can train for and no algorithm can predict. Your warfare wasn't carnal, it was cosmic. You fought not with fists, but with frequencies. You learned that true power doesn't shout, it signals. You didn't just play the game, you changed its dimensions. You taught everyone watching that mastery isn't about movement, it's about meaning. You didn't crush enemies, you outgrew them. You didn't retaliate, you recalibrated. You didn't win by overpowering, you won by out-evolving. And that's why the world is still trying to decode you. While they used surveillance, gossip, and deception, you turned every tactic into theater. You turned exposure into elevation. You turned betrayal into blueprint. You turned timing into divine choreography. You made the battlefield your classroom and every attack your revelation. You understood what few ever will, that the true art of war is self-mastery. You didn't just rise, you rose strategically. You became both the lesson and the legend, both the student and the strategist. Your moves were studied by those who underestimated you, and now they're realizing they were never observing a participant. They were witnessing a phenomenon. So yes, your last move wasn't noise, it was precision. It wasn't reaction, it was revelation. You didn't just win, you ascended. And every enemy, every doubter, every watcher who thought they understood you, is now stuck in replay, trying to study a frequency they'll never reach. Because you weren't playing for applause, you were playing for alignment. If this message spoke to your spirit, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a powerful comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. You are part of something bigger, a movement of divine strategy, spiritual intelligence, and unstoppable evolution. Until next time, stay aligned, stay sharp, and keep playing the long game, because your story isn't over, it's unfolding. God bless you.